My name is Margaret. I'm 72 years old, and I thought I had raised my son better than this. I was in my bedroom that night, half asleep, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up out of habit, and there it was, a voice note from my son, meant for his wife. I don't even know why it played automatically, but when I heard his voice, my heart nearly stopped. He said, clear as day, don't worry, once Mom's out of the way, everything will finally be ours. We just need to push her into agreeing. I froze. My chest felt tight, my ears rang, and I replayed it again, praying I had misunderstood. But no, it was real. My son, my only child, the boy I worked 3 jobs to raise, was planning something behind my back. He even called me a burden, said I was holding him back, and that I'd outlived my usefulness. Can you imagine hearing that from the very person you gave your whole life to? I sat in the dark with tears rolling down my face, gripping my phone so hard my hand shook. A part of me wanted to rush straight to him and demand answers. But another part of me knew if I moved too soon, I'd never get the truth. The note ended with his wife's soft laugh and her saying, "Good. Let's finish this before the baby comes." That laugh cut deeper than any knife. I whispered out loud, almost like I was talking to my late husband. Did my own son just plan to betray me? My stomach turned, my breath caught, and for the first time in my life, I felt afraid of my own blood. Tell me, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have confronted him right then, or stayed quiet and waited? Because what I chose next, it changed everything. Margaret had not always been a woman filled with suspicion. Just months before that night, her days were simple, quiet, and predictable. She lived alone in the same modest suburban home she and her late husband had bought 40 years ago. The neighbors knew her as the sweet old lady who baked pies in the fall and shoveled her own driveway in the winter. She was proud of her independence, even though she depended on her son for a few things: rides to the doctor, help with heavy groceries, a little financial support when her pension came up short. She thought their bond was strong. She always said, "Family is all we've got," and she lived by that. Every time her son visited, she made his favorite meals: roast chicken, cornbread, apple pie. She spoiled his wife too, even when she noticed how distant she was. Margaret brushed it off as stress, or maybe just personality differences. But one evening, after dinner, Margaret caught something in her son's voice. It was a hesitation, a pause when she thanked him for helping with a bill. He looked at his wife, then back at her, and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. That smile haunted her all night. And when he left, she swore she heard his wife mutter under her breath, "This won't last much longer." What exactly did she mean by that? Margaret told herself not to overthink it. But deep down, a small seed of doubt was already growing. The weeks that followed made Margaret more uneasy. She noticed her son visiting less often, staying shorter each time. He avoided looking her in the eyes. His wife, Amelia, had stopped calling her altogether. Margaret would sit alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty seat where her son used to linger, and wonder what she had done wrong. Then one night, as she was locking up the house, she heard muffled voices outside. It was them, her son and his wife. Margaret leaned close to the window, heart pounding. She didn't mean to spy, but the words froze her in place. Amelia hissed, "You promised me we'd get rid of her before the baby arrives. I can't live with her hanging around forever." Margaret's knees buckled. She clutched the curtain, barely breathing. Her son didn't argue. He just sighed and muttered, I know. Just give me time." Her world started to crumble right then. Would you have confronted them that moment, or held it inside like Margaret did? Sleep became impossible after that night. Every sound in the house made Margaret jump. She told herself she was being paranoid, but her gut said otherwise. She tried to act normal, serving coffee and pie when her son stopped by, but every smile felt fake. She couldn't shake the feeling that every word they spoke to her carried a double meaning. One afternoon, she watched from the porch as her son stood by his car, shoving papers into the glove compartment. She asked casually what they were. He snapped at her so harshly it sent chills down her spine. "Why do you always have to question everything?" Then he slammed the door and drove off. That wasn't her son. That was someone else. That night, Margaret lay awake asking herself the same question over and over. What is he hiding from me? The following Sunday dinner was supposed to bring comfort, but instead it felt like sitting in the middle of a storm. Margaret cooked like always, hoping the smell of roast and pie would ease the tension, but the room was cold. Her son and Amelia whispered between themselves, exchanging glances, barely touching their food. Margaret's hands shook as she cleared the plates. Something told her to check the trash. Buried under crumpled napkins, she saw it, an official receipt. The words made her heart stop. Down payment received. Sunset Pines Nursing Home. She dropped it back into the trash as if it burned her fingers. Her son looked up from the table, eyes narrowing. "Is something wrong, Mom?" he asked slowly. Margaret forced a smile, but her voice cracked as she whispered, "No, nothing at all." But inside, she knew everything was about to fall apart. I couldn't get that receipt out of my mind. Sunset Pines Nursing Home. My son had paid for something I never agreed to, and suddenly the voice note made perfect sense. That night, I sat in my room replaying the message over and over, each word digging deeper into my chest. "Once she's gone, everything will be ours." The cruelty in his tone shocked me more than the words themselves. My son wasn't just drifting away from me, he was planning my disappearance. I gripped the phone so tightly my hand shook. I wanted to call him, scream at him, beg him to explain. But I knew if I showed my cards too soon, I'd lose any chance to uncover the truth. So I listened again, this time forcing myself to focus on every detail. He had said, push her into agreeing. Agreeing to what? That question kept me up the rest of the night. I have to ask you, what would you have done if you heard your own child plotting like that? Would you have run straight to the police, or stayed silent like I did, waiting for more proof? Because the path I chose was filled with pain, and I still wonder if it was the right one. The next morning, I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror without crying. I fell apart after that night. For days, I walked through the house like a ghost, remembering every sacrifice I'd ever made for my son. I remembered the winters I wore thin coats, so he could have warm ones, the dinners where I pretended I wasn't hungry so he could eat his fill, the nights I cried myself to sleep after his father died, swearing I'd raise him into a good man. And now, this was the man he had become. I sat on the edge of my bed with my late husband's photo in my hands, whispering, "Where did we go wrong?" Tears blurred my vision, but the anger burning underneath kept me from collapsing completely. Then came a knock at the door. It was my son. His smile was forced, his voice too sweet. "Hey, Mom, how are you feeling today?" he asked. My heart pounded as I looked at him, wondering if he could see the suspicion in my eyes. For the first time, I lied to him. "I'm fine," I said softly. But inside, I was screaming. That night, I decided I couldn't sit back anymore. I needed answers. When he and his wife left, I started searching. I went through old drawers, files my husband left behind, anything that could explain what they were after. Hours later, tucked inside an envelope, I found something that made my blood run cold. Documents about my husband's pension. There was a clause I never knew about. If I passed, everything, including the house and savings, would go directly to my son. My hands trembled as I read it again and again. Suddenly, it all clicked. This wasn't just about me being a burden. This was about money. But the worst part? Among the papers was a form with my name already signed at the bottom. Only it wasn't my signature. My stomach dropped. Someone had forged my name. I heard the garage door slam outside. My son was back. And in that moment, I knew I was in more danger than I had ever imagined. The next day, I tested him. Over coffee, I casually asked, "Do you ever think about Dad's pension?" It must have been complicated to sort through. His face changed instantly. He avoided my eyes, mumbled something about not remembering, then grew angry. "Why do you always dig into things you don't understand?" he snapped. My heart sank. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. He stormed out of the kitchen, his wife glaring at me before following him. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house. For hours, I sat at that table, staring at the empty chairs where laughter used to live. A part of me wanted to collapse, but another part whispered, "Not yet. Not until you know everything." Later that night, I pressed my ear to the window when I heard voices outside. His wife hissed, "She's getting suspicious. What if she figures it out?" And his answer made me shiver. "Then we'll handle it." The very next morning, my neighbor knocked on my door. She's a kind woman who always looks out for me. She said casually, "Funny thing, I saw your son over at Sunset Pines last week. Looked like he was taking a tour of the place." My knees nearly gave out. He wasn't just paying a deposit, he was making sure the place was ready for me. My neighbor chatted on about the nice garden the facility had, but I could barely breathe. When I closed the door, a letter was sitting on the floor. I picked it up with trembling hands. It was official. An eviction notice. They were forcing me out of my own home. I pressed the paper to my chest, my whole body shaking. Tears burned my eyes, but I couldn't cry. Not this time. Because now I knew they were done waiting. And if I didn't fight back, I would lose everything. The letter shook me to my core. An eviction notice. My own son wanted me out of the house I built my life in. I held the paper in my hands, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. For a moment, I thought maybe I should just give in, pack up quietly, and let them win. After all, I was old, tired, and alone. Maybe I really was the burden they said I was. But then, late that night, as I walked past their room when they thought I was asleep, I heard her voice. My daughter-in-law was laughing on the phone. She said, "Don't worry, once she's in there, she won't last long. A few months at most, and then everything is ours." Those words lit a fire in me. I stumbled back into my room, tears blinding me, but for the first time in weeks I felt something stronger than fear.
Rage.
They weren't just planning to move me, they were planning for my death. Tell me, if you were me, would you have fought back or let it all swallow you? Because in that moment, I swore to myself, I was not going to let them bury me alive. I woke up the next morning with a plan. My husband's voice echoed in my memory, the way he used to tell me, "Never let anyone silence you, Margaret." For the first time in a long time, I felt strong. I pulled out the forged papers I'd found, slid them into an envelope, and tucked them in a safe place. Then I picked up my phone and set it to record. That evening, when my son and his wife started arguing in the kitchen, I stood quietly in the hall, capturing every word. "You pushed her too fast," Amelia hissed. "If she finds out about the forgery, we're screwed." My son snapped back, "Relax. Once she's gone, no one will care." Hearing those words out loud was like being stabbed, but now I had proof. Real proof. My hands trembled as I stopped the recording. I looked at their shadows through the doorway, laughing together, planning my end, and for the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a hunter, and I knew exactly what my next step had to be. The following Sunday, I invited them over for dinner. They thought it was the same old routine. My son kissed me on the cheek. Amelia smirked like nothing was wrong, and I served the meal with steady hands. My heart was racing, but my face was calm. Halfway through dessert, I cleared my throat. There's something I'd like everyone to hear. I pulled out my phone, pressed play, and their voices filled the room. The recording echoed through the house. Once she's gone, everything will be ours. Forks clattered against plates. Amelia's face turned white. My son froze, staring at me like I'd ripped the mask off his face in front of the world. The rest of the family, who I'd invited at the last minute, gasped in shock. My sister stood up, pointing at him. How could you do this to your own mother? Chaos exploded around the table. Amelia grabbed her purse and stormed out. My son fell to his knees, grabbing my hand. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it, I swear. I pulled my hand back, my voice cold. Are you begging for forgiveness? Or for my money? The next morning, I went straight to a lawyer. I handed him the forged documents, the eviction letter, and the recording. He looked at me with wide eyes and said, "You've got enough here to protect yourself and press charges." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The lawyer secured my assets, made sure my home couldn't be touched, and filed a report about the forgery. My son's plan was falling apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. A few days later, he came by the house, papers in his hand, his face pale. Mom, they're saying I could be charged. Please, you have to help me. You can fix this. I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed, looking at the man I had once called my pride and joy. For years, I gave him everything I had. Now, he was nothing but a stranger begging for mercy. And I had to decide, do I save him or let him face the consequences of his own greed? Months later, the dust had settled. The house was mine again, my pension safe, my life secure. My son had lost nearly everything. His wife left him the moment the lawyer got involved. Alone, broke, and desperate, he came crawling back. He showed up on my porch one rainy afternoon, soaked through, eyes hollow. Mom, he whispered, I'm sorry. I lost everything. I don't want your money. I just want my mother back. For a moment, my heart ached. I saw the little boy I used to tuck into bed, the boy who once called me his hero. But then I remembered the voice note, the laughter, the forged papers, the way they planned my end. I took a deep breath and said, I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean trust. You'll always be my son, but you will never again have the power to hurt me. He looked shattered as I closed the door. I leaned against it, tears falling, but inside I felt free. I lost a son the day I heard that voice note, but I found something greater, my own voice. And this time, no one will silence it. So I ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have let him back in? Or would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know, what would your heart have chosen?